I think a lot of us have like that one person at work that really makes our life difficult, right? Well, Benjamin Franklin was the exact same way. He had this political rival and he was trying to figure out, how do I get this guy on my side? Well, he hears that the guy has a copy of a very rare book. Writes the guy a letter, says, I've been trying to find a copy of that book everywhere. It would mean so much to me if you would let me borrow it for like a week and I'll return it right back to you. The guy lends it to him, Franklin returns it, and then they were friends from that point on until the day that guy died. So lasting bonds of friendship. How did he turn this around? He didn't do the guy a favor. He didn't pay him off. He didn't compliment him. He didn't write him a beautiful poem.
I hate you so much it makes me sick. It even makes me rhyme.
He asked him for something. He asked the other guy to do him a favor, and somehow that improved the guy's perception of him. This is called the Benjamin Franklin effect because it was detailed in his autobiography. It's a very famous historical example, but it's been studied and replicated since. Back in the late 60s, there was a very early study where researchers had subjects like play a game where if they got a bunch of questions right, they could win money, and they got to keep the money, real money. But afterwards, the researcher would approach some of them, not all of them, but a few of them he'd approach and go, I'm paying out of pocket for this study. You don't have to, no pressure, but if you want to, if you gave it back to me, that would be super helpful. Now, the people that he did not approach, the ones that got to keep the money, they asked him, what'd you think of the researcher? Scale of 1 to 10 kind of thing. They're like, he's an all right guy. The people that he asked to give the money back to him actually liked him more. This, again, seems super counterintuitive. He asks for a favor, he imposes on them, and they end up liking him more because of it. I think the best way to understand this is to ask yourself, am I a good person? I think the most of us will say yes. And how do you know that? How do we assess somebody as a good person? Usually, it's because they have performed good behaviors in the past. The idea is that behaviors precede the assessment. You do good things, you're a good person. You do bad things, you're a bad person. But it turns out human behavior is not that simple. Good people don't always do the right thing. Our behavior is determined by a very complex set of different variables interacting with each other in a dynamic, real-time, chaotic world. So sometimes we act first and then justify it later. So for example, if you cut somebody off in traffic, not a very nice thing to do, right? So do you go, wow, I guess I'm not a good person after all? No, you tell yourself it was warranted. You go, well, that guy was driving like a maniac. He was tailgating me the whole way down the last mile and a half. He was swerving in and out of his lanes. You convince yourself that he's the bad person. Why? Because you did something bad to them. You're justifying yourself as the good guy, doing good things for good people and only doing bad things when it's a really bad person that kind of deserves it. This stems from an idea in psychology called cognitive dissonance. We think we're good people, we don't always do the right thing. So how do we rectify that? We don't change our concept of who we are, we change our concept of what we did. So going back to the study, there are probably a million reasons that a subject might give the money back to the researcher. Maybe they just felt awkward. It's hard to say no when someone's begging you to help them out. And afterwards, they have to ask themselves when they walk out of the lab, why did I give that guy $100? Like, I barely know him, right? What did I just get scammed? No. You tell yourself, no, I did the right thing. He was a nice guy. His heart was in the right place. And this leads to a change in their assessment of someone, not based on that person's actual behavior, based on their own behaviors. And we see this effect in other studies too. A few years later, there was an experiment that asked subjects to teach somebody some kind of behavior. And half the time they asked them, be really nice, like encourage them, kind of build them up. And then the other half of the time, they said, be really harsh, criticize them, kind of break them down, insult them. Afterwards, they asked those teachers, right, the subjects, to rate how likable each of the learners were. When it came to the people they were nice to, they rated those people as nicer, as more likable. When it came to the people they were randomly assigned to be mean to, they rated them as more irritable, less likable. Again, they are justifying their behavior after the fact. I wasn't mean to a nice guy. I was mean to someone that was already kind of cranky. They had it coming. And I was nice to the people that were nice to me. They're keeping their self-image consistent. They're reducing cognitive dissonance by justifying their actions retroactively. So what are the practical applications of this effect? Well, sales is the really classic one. So you can imagine someone walks into like a car dealership and the salesperson goes, before we get started, would you mind signing up for our mailing list? Our boss has like this quota. I've got to put 10 people a week on it. I'm way behind. Like, it'd be a huge favor. And if the person puts their name down and they go, oh my God, thank you so much. You have no idea what a help that is. Now there's kind of a perceived bond or a bit of the feeling, at least, of a relationship there, whereas before they were complete strangers. And another application would be relationships. So remember, this goes both ways. We tend to convince ourselves that we like the people we treat well and that we dislike the people we treat poorly. So you can imagine a couple that's been together for years and years, and they live together, and at some point they kind of get on each other's nerves and you may snap at them. And after you say something that you maybe regret or shouldn't have, you have to process it. Did you make a mistake? Were you irritable? Most people have a very hard time digesting that concept. So they convince themselves, no, it was them. They were being super annoying, or they treat me really poorly, and so eventually, of course, I'm going to snap. And this creates a cycle of conflict that feeds a worsening perception of your significant other, which leads to more conflict. Now, you can imagine the converse. Maybe you, instead of snapping, occasionally make a point of complimenting them, telling them they look beautiful, or they've got a wonderful smile, or thanking them for doing the dishes. Remember, our behaviors often lead our perceptions of other people. So, Benjamin Franklin effect. Cute name, a fun party trick, but it also reveals something that I think is kind of disturbing about human nature. At its core, what it's saying is that we as people are capable of removing our assessments of who we are from the behaviors that we actually perform. This incredible ability to create a worldview in which our behaviors are always justified is a thread that can be seen in some of the worst atrocities throughout history. And it's a part of human behavior that exists in all of us, whether you'd like to believe it or not. So as lighthearted as Ben Franklin's original anecdote about borrowing a book was, it's actually incredibly insightful, and it peels back some very disturbing but very important layers to consider about the human condition and our relationship with the world around us.